Hi guys, today we're finally talking about a much requested topic, which is some tips for helping you pick the right career choice. In this video, we're going to discuss how career assessment works to help determine a person's most fitting vocation, discuss a few different theories of career development, and I'm also going to give you my own perspective and advice on this. Also, I have some really exciting news today. My new mental health journal, the Personal Growth Journal 75 Templates to Thrive, is now out for pre-order in ebook version. The paperback version is going to be out on December 28th, and the pre-orders will come out on December 28th as well. So let me explain a little bit about this journal and how it's different from the previous one, A Season of Life. A Season of Life is really everyday journaling for 90 days. It has some introductory pages and some pages at the end help you bookend the 90 days, but the 90 days are largely, the same journaling technique over and over again. Now, the new mental health journal is slightly different. This one is for journaling on an as-needed basis. So basically, it has 75 different situations that you could possibly be going through related to emotion regulation, confusing relationship interactions, planning for the future, when you need a pick-me-up, all sorts of different templates. And for each of those situations, it gives you a journaling template that you can use to process through what's going on for you. So I do use both techniques. I use A Season of Life every day, and I use the 75 templates on an as-needed basis. So if you're wanting to pre-order the ebook version, I highly recommend that if you are somewhere that Amazon doesn't easily ship. However, I will say this is primarily a journal that's supposed to be done on pen and paper, and it's formatted to be printed out. So the paperback version is really what I would most recommend. The ebook version, I have optimized it for Kindle use. The truth of the matter is that it just doesn't look as good. And that's because your own Kindle settings are going to affect how it looks. So I would recommend you get the ebook if you cannot get the paperback hard copy. But if you are somewhere where Amazon easily ships, I would definitely hold out until December 28th for the paperback version. Let's get into it. Starting with how career assessment works. What do career counselors or occupational psychologists typically do to help you figure out the best career for you? So there are largely four components of career assessment. The first one is personality tests, interest inventories, skills assessments, also called ability tests or aptitude tests, and values assessments. So we're going to go through each one of these, and for each one of these four types of assessment, I'm actually going to link a test in a pinned comment so that you can take these tests for yourself and sort of follow along and see what you're scoring on them. Personality tests can be a big component of career assessment because the logic there is that your personality traits are going to better equip you for certain vocations versus others, and certain personality traits might actually put you at risk of not doing as well in other careers. Now, you may know I do not love the MBTI, and the reason for that is that it's not a particularly valid or reliable metric. Some places disagree with that, but overall, within the scientific community, it's kind of up for discussion whether it's a valid psychometric. And I also don't like that the MBTI is sometimes used in job application processes as a way of gatekeeping. So for instance, a lot of jobs will make people take the MBTI and then completely cut off anyone who scores as an introvert, which to me sounds a little bit like discrimination. What do I know? However, I will say that the MBTI can be a helpful tool for just gaining insight into what careers could be good for you, instead of using it as a cutoff point, more so using it as a jumping off point. So the MBTI is one test that can be used for career assessment. Also, the MMPI is a really big one. Now, this one is a very comprehensive and very established psychometric test. I've done MMPIs on people when I used to do assessment in my practicum. It's good for getting a sense of a person's personality, and it can also be a helpful piece of the puzzle when you're trying to gain diagnostic clarity on a client. However, I will say I don't see how it could be quite as helpful for career assessment. What I will say about personality assessment, although I don't love these two tests being used to determine what careers are the best fit for you, I do think that gaining insight about your personality, either with a career counselor or on your own, is something that could be a really good way to figure out what career is best for you. And a career counselor could be particularly beneficial for this because they can help you figure out, okay, based on your personality, what are the different jobs that this could be a helpful personality to have in. But here are some questions you can ask yourself if you don't have access to a career counselor. Which traits are my biggest strengths? Which traits are my biggest weaknesses? Make a list of all the different careers you're considering and jot down what traits you think would be needed for those careers and which ones would hold a person back. And look it up too, because you don't know what you don't know. So look up what sorts of personality traits or features could be helpful for someone in this particular career. The best people that are going to know about this are the people in that career. Like if I were to guess the best personality type to become a therapist, I would say, if we're going by the big 5 personality traits, which is another personality test that you could use to figure out what personality you have, probably a person that's going to have the easiest time being a therapist is extroverted, conscientious, open to experiences, agreeable, and low in neuroticism. I can say this as someone who's been through grad school, who is a therapist, who acknowledges what parts of my own personality don't mesh so well with the field and which parts do mesh and what I've seen in the people around me. Now, the second type of assessment that career counselors often do is interest inventories. These basically just assess what your interests are, what you're interested in doing. Interest inventories that have something called a Holland code can be particularly helpful. We're going to touch on what a Holland code is a little bit later in this. Basically, they're one way of thinking about your interests, and they include realistic, enterprising, investigative, artistic, social, and conventional. For instance, I took an interest inventory and I got that I'm very high in creating and I'm somewhat high in persuading and helping. So this makes a lot of sense because my entire business relies around creating content, being a therapist, and writing. So the third type of career assessment includes skills assessments. And this is pretty straightforward. It's what are you good at? What skills do you have? This is, more self-explanatory, but to an extent, it's the one that's most flexible. You can always gain skills. You can gain competence in a certain field. Not as much can you change your personality or change what you're interested in. The fourth type of assessment is values assessments. And this is important because certain vocations do have certain values that they prioritize over others. And misalignment between your own personal values and the values of the career can result in pretty catastrophic outcomes. For instance, in the field of psychology, we have certain tenets that we all have to abide by: beneficence and non-maleficence, justice, integrity and responsibility, fidelity, respect for human rights and dignity. If you don't stand by those values, you're probably going to get your license revoked because you're probably going to do something that is against those values. So it's extremely, extremely important to find a career that shares your values, whatever they are. Now, in order to understand what vocation is best for you, I think it's also important to understand the different theories of career development, how each of us develop a work identity, and how each of us develops what we're best fit for. Some of these theories are called developmental, which basically means they focus on the stages of life that a person goes through and what they need at those different stages. One such theory is called Ginsberg's theory. Per Ginsberg's theory, we go through several stages in life in which we try to find the right career for us. So it starts under 11 years old with us taking part in fantasy. I'm sure you remember role-playing, playing hide and seek, playing dress-up, pretending, acting out what it's like to be a firefighter or a doctor. Then in adolescence, so around age 11 to 17, we go into the tentative stage. This is when we start tentatively thinking about different careers we might try and how that could look for us. And then in young adulthood, so age 17 to 24, we move more into the realistic stage, in which we actually select a specific career. So we might toy with different undergrad majors, declare a major. There's the exploration stage, in which we gain experiences and we choose between several alternatives. Next comes crystallization, in which we make a clear choice. And the last stage is called specification, which is when you hone in on one occupation. Another developmental theory is called Super's developmental self-concept, which states that our vocation develops along with our self-concept. So first there's the growth stage, which is from birth to around the mid-teens, and this is when our task is to just develop what we like and dislike. Next comes the exploration stage, which is mid-teens to early 20s, and here we explore different roles and jobs. In the establishment phase, which is in our mid-20s to mid-40s, our vocation stabilizes and advances. Next comes the maintenance stage in our 40s to early 60s, in which our vocation stays mostly stable. And then we experience the disengagement or decline stage in our late 60s up to retirement, which is when we decrease our work and start to move towards retirement. So those are some examples of theories that focus on a person's development across their life stages. But there's also something called trait factor theories. Trait factor theories basically say that what's important is compatibility between your personality traits and the traits required to do a good job in that career. One such theory is called Holland's career typology theory. So Holland said that there are 6 overall types of people. There are realistic people who like manual, adventurous work. These people might be a good fit for farming, construction, architecture, engineering. There are people who are investigative, meaning they like using their intellect and being analytical. These people could go on to become scientists, biologists, chemists, doctors, working in IT. There are people who are more artistic. These people enjoy writing, music, emotion, art. These people could become artists, poets, writers, musicians, interior designers, content creators, video editors, etc. People who are very social tend to focus on people skills. These could be therapists, teachers, spiritual leaders. Then there are also enterprising people. These are very extroverted and persuasive. They could go on to become lawyers, business people, salespeople, politicians, TV personalities, celebrities. And lastly, there are the conventional people, those who like rules, self-control, order, and systematic processes. These might become mathematicians, bankers, data entry clerks, cashiers, and so forth. Per Holland's theory, people tend to have one dominant type and 2 secondary types that they abide by. So for me, I know without a doubt, artistic is my primary type and investigative and social are secondary. And there's also social cognitive theory, which says that people make decisions based on modeling and self-efficacy. Self-efficacy basically just means your ability to believe that you can accomplish the things you set out to do. So within social cognitive theory, the career that we choose largely depends on the people around us, what messages we get from society or from our immediate system, like our family members, about what we should do with our lives and what we see modeled around us. I don't think it's a coincidence, for instance, that a lot of people end up in the same career as their parents. Like, sure, there might be a genetic or skills-related component there, but there's also the modeling aspect of this is what you grew up seeing the people around you do. This is kind of the normal. And self-efficacy is derived from a few things: personal performance, vicarious experience, verbal persuasion, and physiological and emotional factors. Personal performance is simple. It's just what have you been successful at in the past versus what have you failed at in the past. If you're consistently failing at math, probably not going to go on to be a mathematician. Vicarious experience means watching other people like you succeed at something. For instance, if you are a young woman and you really want to be a writer, if you're constantly seeing other young women be writers around you, that's going to set you up for success more than if, for instance, every single writer that you read is a middle-aged man. Verbal persuasion basically means who's encouraging or discouraging you. Are people telling you you're so good at this or you're not good at this? Because that's bound to affect you. And physiological and emotional factors also play a role. For instance, if a certain vocation is going to stress you out, you might be less likely to do it. So those are some examples of theories on how career develops. But let me give you my own personal advice here for a little bit. One qualm that I have with a lot of these theories is it seems very like one and done. Like you pick a thing, you become really specialized in it, and then you eventually decline in that thing. I don't think that that's a healthy way to view learning. I think that learning needs to be a lifelong process, and ideally, of course, I recognize this is not possible for everyone, and we wouldn't have certain careers if this were the case for everyone. But ideally, everyone would be doing and learning what they truly feel passionate about. I actually don't believe in retirement. I believe that we should feel so motivated to get up and do the things that we love every day that we're going to want to do it past the age of 65. You know, like for me, I am never going to not write as long as I can. As long as I can see and type and think clearly, I will be writing my whole life. I don't have this fantasy of like, oh, after age 65, I'm just going to lounge around and just sit back and relax. Like, that's not meaningful to me. What's meaningful to me is creating and writing and sharing the beauty that I see with the world to other people through words. So I think as a society, we probably would benefit from moving less from such a static linear model to more of a model that emphasizes the continuous process and the ever-changing process of growth. Because that's another thing, is careers and interests are not static. Life is always changing. We as people are changing. Our interests change. Our circumstances change. It makes sense that we're also going to, at one point in our life, be a better fit for one career versus another. And I personally, as someone who does multiple things in my business, I do not like the idea that I have to just limit myself to one thing. I think it's a lot more cyclical than people talk about. If you're interested in this topic, read up on the concept of Ikigai. I think actually the Ikigai book is in my book recommendations on my Amazon storefront. And my other piece of advice would be, don't pick a career based on fear. I feel like this is a mistake I really made early on in my career, which is I kind of thought about how introverted and shy and afraid of public speaking, ironically, that I was. And I wanted to do something that wasn't a whole lot of public speaking and wasn't a whole lot of teamwork. I wanted to just speak to people one-on-one, and I thought that being a therapist would be the way to do that. Unfortunately, I learned that is not what's required to be a therapist. To be a therapist, you do have to work in a team. You have to consult with your peers. You have to have group supervision. You have to give a ton of public speaking presentations. Essentially, what I did when I said, oh, I don't want to do this one thing or just speak to groups of people, I was closing off a bunch of different careers that ironically maybe would have been less public speaking than what being a therapist is. Don't pick a career based on what you are afraid of doing, because chances are you are probably going to have to get over that fear regardless of what career you're in. Choose based on what your passion is, what you get up every day and feel really excited to do, rather than what you don't want to do. Hope this was helpful. Don't forget to pre-order the ebook of the New Mental Health Journal if you don't have Amazon where you live, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments.